You're not bad at English. I need you to hear that clearly before we go any further. Because the story you've been telling yourself is wrong, and it's time to replace it with the truth. The real problem isn't your grammar. It isn't your accent. It isn't even your vocabulary size. The real problem is a habit, a quiet, invisible habit that almost every intermediate learner has, and it has been quietly working against you for years without you even noticing. Today, in the next few minutes, I'm going to expose that habit, and then I'm going to give you the exact tool that replaces it. By the end of this video, you will have over 60 advanced English words and expressions, real, C1 to SP2 level vocabulary, each one tied to a real situation you actually live through every single day. Not theory, not a random word list you'll forget by tomorrow. Words you can use tonight in a real conversation. So here's my first instruction, and I want you to actually do it. Say this out loud right now, wherever you are. I am ready to fix this. Say it. Because the moment you say something out loud, your brain treats it differently than when you just think it. That's not a trick. That's how memory works. And we're going to use that fact again and again in this lesson. My name is Emma, and this is Natural Word English, the channel where you don't just learn words, you learn to own them. So let's name the habit. The habit is called passive listening, and here's what makes it so dangerous. It feels productive. You put on a podcast while you cook. You watch a show with subtitles while you eat. You listen to English in the background while you work. And every single time, your brain quietly says, "Good, we're improving," when in reality, almost nothing is being absorbed. Passive listening means your ears are receiving sound, but your mind is not actively processing meaning, structure, or new vocabulary. It's the audio equivalent of scrolling through a book without reading a single page. The opposite of this is called active listening. Sometimes we also call it engaged or receptive listening in the productive sense, where your brain is decoding, predicting, and storing information in real time. Here's a simple way to picture the difference. Passive listening is like standing under a waterfall and hoping some of the water sticks to you. Active listening is like cupping your hands and actually catching the water. Same waterfall, completely different result. And that's exactly why some learners can listen to English for 5 years and still feel stuck, while others reach real fluency in 18 months. It was never about how much English they heard. It was about how much they actually caught. Before we dive into today's vocabulary, let me explain quickly why we always teach words inside real context instead of giving you an isolated list, because this single decision is what separates real progress from an illusion of progress. When you memorize a word by itself, like the word meticulous, your brain stores it in a kind of empty folder with almost nothing attached to it. There's no image, no emotion, no situation, so within a few days, that folder often gets lost. But when you learn that same word attached to a scene, a person, a feeling, a conversation. Your brain builds what memory scientists call a rich association. The word doesn't live alone anymore. It lives inside a story, and stories are exactly what your brain is built to remember. That's why every word today comes wrapped inside a moment from ordinary life. Work, emotions, personality, travel, technology, learning itself. Real situations, real people talking to each other, and you shadowing every single one of them. Let's start exactly where we started this whole conversation. Listening and communication itself, because this is the cluster of vocabulary that directly fixes the hidden habit we just named. Picture this. You're on a video call for work, and your colleague is explaining a new project quickly, using unfamiliar terms, and your mind starts to drift because you're trying to catch every single word instead of the overall meaning. This is the exact moment where most learners quietly give up on the conversation inside their heads, even while nodding on camera. Here's your first word: discern. To discern something means to notice or understand it clearly, especially when it isn't obvious at first. The basic word it upgrades is simply notice or figure out, but discern carries more precision, more intention. Listen to this natural sentence. It took me a moment to discern what she actually meant beneath all that technical language. Now, shadow that with me immediately. The way an echo repeats a sound the instant it hears it. Not after thinking about it, not after translating it, just an immediate, natural echo. It took me a moment to discern what she actually meant. Good. That's the real technique of shadowing, by the way. And I'll explain it properly a little later. But for now, just keep echoing every example sentence the second you hear it. Our next word pairs perfectly with discern. Glean. To glean information means to gather it gradually, often from small pieces here and there, especially when the full picture isn't given to you directly. Instead of saying, "I got some information," a fluent speaker might say, "I managed to glean a few useful details from the meeting, even though half of it went over my head." Shadow it with me. I managed to glean a few useful details, even though half of it went over my head. Notice that phrase, went over my head. That's a natural expression, meaning something was too complicated to understand, and native speakers use it constantly in exactly this kind of situation. Now, let's build a real conversation around these two words, because vocabulary only becomes usable once you've heard it move naturally between two people. Picture a small, quiet office kitchen in the late afternoon. Two co-workers, Claire and Daniel, are making coffee before a long meeting. The light outside is fading, and there's the low hum of the coffee machine between their sentences. Claire says, "Honestly, I couldn't fully discern what the client wanted from that email. It felt vague." Daniel replies, "Same here, but I managed to glean that they want the deadline moved up at least." Claire says, "Moved up? That's going to be a problem." Daniel says, "I know. I think we should ask directly instead of guessing. Claire says, "Agreed. I hate when people are indirect about deadlines." Daniel says, "Right. Let's just email them before the meeting starts." Now I want you to shadow this entire exchange with me, both roles, one right after the other, letting your voice rise and fall the way theirs did. I couldn't fully discern what the client wanted. I managed to glean that they want the deadline moved up. Moved up? That's going to be a problem. I think we should ask directly instead of guessing. Let's talk for a second about how English actually sounds when it's spoken quickly, because this is one of the biggest gaps between textbook English and real English. Take the phrase, "went over my head," from a moment ago. In natural fast speech, "went over" often blends into something closer to "went over," with the T softening and the words connecting almost into one sound. Listen to the slow version first. Went over my head. Now the natural fast version. Went over my head, almost like one word. This is called connected speech, and it happens because English speakers don't pronounce words as separate blocks. They link them like a chain. Another example from today, "figure it out" often becomes "figure it out" in fast, casual speech, with the second syllable of "figure" almost disappearing. Slow. Figure it out. Fast. Figure it out. This is exactly the kind of detail that separates someone who understands textbooks from someone who understands real humans talking at real speed, and it's exactly the gap this video is here to close. Let's add 2 more words to this same cluster before we move on. Internalize and assimilate. To internalize something means to absorb it so deeply that it becomes part of how you naturally think or react, not just something you remember on the surface. After months of practice, she finally internalized the grammar pattern. She wasn't translating anymore. She just knew it. To assimilate is closely related, but often used specifically about information, culture, or language, meaning to take it in and make it fully your own. It takes time to assimilate a new language. You can't rush the process, no matter how motivated you are. Shadow both with me. She finally internalized the grammar pattern. It takes time to assimilate a new language. Beautiful. You're already building the exact vocabulary that describes your own learning journey, and that's not an accident. That's intentional, because words you can use to talk about yourself stick far better than random, disconnected examples. Now, let's take a short pause here, just a few seconds, before we move into our next cluster. Close your eyes if you're somewhere safe to do so. Take one slow breath in and let it out slowly. You've just learned 4 solid C1 level words connected by real context, and your brain needs these tiny gaps to actually file the information properly. So don't rush past this moment. Nice work so far. You're already doing something that 90% of learners never do. Listening with intention instead of letting the words simply pass through you. Let's move into our second cluster now. Vocabulary for work and professional life. Because this is one of the places where advanced English matters most in real, high-stakes moments. Picture yourself in a Monday morning meeting. Your manager looks around the room and says, "I need someone to take the lead on this before Thursday." This is exactly the kind of sentence where the right vocabulary can make you sound confident and capable, or where the wrong vocabulary can make you sound hesitant and unsure, even if your idea is excellent. Here's your next word: proactive. Being proactive means taking action before a problem happens, instead of just reacting after it happens. The basic word it upgrades is simply active or responsible. But proactive carries a much stronger, more professional weight. I'd rather be proactive and flag the issue now than deal with a crisis next week. Shadow it. I'd rather be proactive and flag the issue now. Next word: streamline. To streamline a process means to make it simpler, faster, and more efficient by removing anything unnecessary. We managed to streamline the approval process. It used to take 5 steps. Now it only takes 2. Shadow it. We managed to streamline the approval process. And one more: delegate. To delegate a task means to give responsibility for it to someone else, usually because you trust them with it, or because your own time is limited. A good manager knows when to delegate instead of trying to do everything alone. Shadow it. A good manager knows when to delegate instead of trying to do everything alone. Now let's step into a full workplace scene, because this is exactly the kind of moment where these words come alive. Picture a small conference room, mid-morning light, coming through tall windows, 5 people around a table, with laptops open. The quiet tension of a project that's slightly behind schedule. Sarah, the team lead, begins. "Okay, before we run out of time, I want us to be proactive about this delay instead of just hoping it fixes itself." James responds, "Agreed. I think part of the problem is that our process has too many steps. We really need to streamline it." Sarah says, "Good point. What would you cut?" James says, "Honestly, the double approval stage. It's slowing everything down for no real benefit." Sarah nods and says, "Okay, let's do that. And Maria, I'm going to delegate the client update to you. Is that all right?" Maria replies, "Of course. I'll have it ready by tomorrow morning." Now, I want you to try something a little different this time. I'm going to read Sarah's lines, and I want you to become James, reading his lines out loud in the pause I leave for you. Ready? Sarah says, "I want us to be proactive about this delay instead of just hoping it fixes itself." Now you respond as James. Pause and answer naturally in your own words if you can, using the word streamline. Take a moment. Good. Whether you said something close to the original or something completely your own, you just practiced real, spontaneous English, which is far more valuable than perfect repetition. Let's add depth with 2 more work-related words. Leverage and mitigate. To leverage something means to use an existing resource, skill, or advantage to get a better result, almost like using it as a lever to lift something heavier. We should leverage our client's feedback to improve the next version instead of guessing what they want. To mitigate something means to reduce how serious or harmful it is without necessarily eliminating it completely. There's no way to avoid the risk entirely, but we can definitely mitigate it with a backup plan. Shadow both. We should leverage our client's feedback. We can definitely mitigate it with a backup plan. Notice how naturally these words fit into sentences about real decisions, real problems, real solutions. This is precisely why context-based learning works so much better than flashcards with isolated definitions. Let's talk about intonation for a moment, because this is another element that textbooks almost never explain properly. In English, questions that expect a yes or no answer usually rise in pitch at the end, while questions asking for specific information using words like what, where, why, or how usually fall at the end. Listen to the difference. Rising. Is that all right? Your voice climbs on the last word. Falling. What would you cut? Your voice drops on the last word. Try both with me. Rising first. Is that all right? Now falling. What would you cut? This single pattern, when you get it right, instantly makes your questions sound more natural, more native, even if every single word you use is simple. 2 more words before we shift clusters: negotiate and concise. To negotiate means to discuss something with someone in order to reach an agreement, often involving some compromise from both sides. Both sides. We negotiated a lower price with the supplier. It took 3 calls, but it was worth it. To be concise means to express something clearly using few words with no unnecessary detail. Try to keep the email concise. Nobody wants to read 5 paragraphs before finding the point. Shadowed. Both. We negotiated a lower price with the supplier. Try to keep the email concise. I want you to notice something interesting here. The instruction I just gave you about keeping things concise is itself a piece of communication advice you can use in your real life. Starting today, in English or in your own language. Good communication skills transfer everywhere. Let's move now to a cluster that touches something deeply personal: emotions and mindset, because expressing feelings accurately in English is one of the fastest ways to sound truly fluent, since emotional vocabulary rarely gets taught properly in traditional classrooms. Picture the end of a long, difficult day. You're finally sitting down, and someone asks how you're doing. Saying, "I'm tired" is fine, but it doesn't capture what's actually happening inside you. And that gap between what you feel and what you can say is exactly what creates frustration for English learners. Let's close that gap. Here's your next word: overwhelmed. To feel overwhelmed means to feel like you have more to deal with than you can handle, mentally or emotionally, all at once. Between the deadline and the family situation, I've honestly felt overwhelmed this whole week. Shadow it. I've honestly felt overwhelmed this whole week. Next, apprehensive. To feel apprehensive means to feel nervous or worried about something that hasn't happened yet, usually because the outcome is uncertain. It's usually, I'm a little apprehensive about the interview tomorrow. I don't know what questions they'll ask. Shadow it. I'm a little apprehensive about the interview tomorrow. And the opposite emotional direction. Elated. To feel elated means to feel extremely happy and excited, more intense than just happy or glad. When she got the acceptance email, she felt completely elated. She couldn't stop smiling for hours. Shadow it. She felt completely elated. She couldn't stop smiling for hours. Let's build a scene around these emotional words, because emotion always lands harder when it's attached to a real human moment. Picture two friends, Anna and Mark, sitting outside a small cafe in the early evening. The sky turning orange, cups of coffee slowly going cold between them. Anna says, "Honestly, I've been feeling so overwhelmed lately. Work, family, everything at once." Mark replies, "I get that. Is there anything specific stressing you out right now?" Anna says, "Mostly the presentation on Friday. I keep feeling apprehensive every time I think about it." Mark says, "You'll do great. You always do." Anna says, "I hope so. Actually, remember when I got that promotion last year?" Mark says, "Of course, you were elated for weeks." Anna laughs and says, "I really was." Now shadow this full exchange with me, letting the emotion actually shape your voice, softer for the worried lines, brighter for the happy ones. "Ooh, I've been feeling so overwhelmed lately. I keep feeling apprehensive every time I think about it. You were elated for weeks. I really was." Let's add two more essential emotional words, resilient and drained. To be resilient means to recover quickly from difficulty, to bend without breaking under pressure. After everything that happened this year, she's proven to be incredibly resilient. To feel drained means to feel like all your energy has been used up, physically or emotionally exhausted. By Friday evening, "I always feel completely drained. I just want silence." Shadow both. She's proven to be incredibly resilient. By Friday evening, "I always feel completely drained." Notice how much more precise your emotional expression becomes with words like these. Instead of only ever saying tired or stressed, you now have language that actually matches the size and shape of what you're feeling. This is a good moment to remind you of something important about listening for meaning instead of listening for every single word. Because in the conversation we just heard, there's a chance you didn't catch every single word perfectly. And that's completely fine. That's actually normal, even for advanced learners. When native speakers talk quickly, especially in casual conversation, the goal is never to catch 100% of the words. The goal is to catch the overall meaning and respond naturally. If someone speaks fast and you miss a detail, you don't need to stop the conversation and ask them to repeat everything. You can simply respond with natural filler phrases while your brain catches up. Things like, "I see," "That makes sense," or simply, "Right," nodding slightly as you process. These small phrases buy you a second or two to think, and they keep the conversation flowing naturally instead of awkwardly. This is one of the most underrated fluency skills there is, because fluent doesn't mean understanding everything instantly. It means handling the gaps smoothly. You're doing genuinely excellent work right now. We've covered nearly 20 advanced words already, tied to real conversations, real emotions, real workplace moments, and your brain is quietly building stronger and stronger connections with every single one. Let's keep this momentum going into our next cluster. Let's move into personality and self-description, because these are some of the most useful words you'll ever learn, since you'll use them constantly. Describing yourself, describing coworkers, describing friends, describing people you're just meeting for the first time. Picture a moment at a networking event. Someone asks you to describe your working style in one sentence, and this is exactly the kind of moment where basic words like good or hardworking simply don't do the job. Here's your next word: meticulous. Being meticulous means being extremely careful and precise about details, sometimes almost perfectionist in the best sense. She's incredibly meticulous with her work. She checks everything twice before sending it. Shadow it. She's incredibly meticulous with her work. Next, adaptable. Being adaptable means being able to adjust easily to new situations, conditions, or changes without much difficulty. One thing I really value in a teammate is being adaptable. Plans change constantly in this industry. Shadow it. One thing I really value is being adaptable. And one more: assertive. Being assertive means expressing your opinions and needs confidently and directly without being aggressive or rude about it. I used to struggle with saying no, but I've learned to be more assertive over the years. Shadow it. I've learned to be more assertive over the years. Let's step into a role play here. One of the situations where this vocabulary becomes essential: a job interview. Imagine you're sitting across from an interviewer, palms slightly sweaty, trying to describe your own working style in a way that sounds confident, not rehearsed. The interviewer asks, "How would you describe yourself as a colleague?" Listen to a strong, natural answer. "I'd say I'm quite meticulous. I like getting the details right, but I'm also adaptable. I don't get thrown off when priorities shift suddenly." Now here's your turn to role play. I'm going to ask you the exact same question the interviewer asked, and I want you to answer out loud in your own words, using at least one of the words we just learned. Ready? How would you describe yourself as a colleague? Pause now and actually answer out loud. Take your time. Whatever you said, notice how it felt different from simply repeating a sentence. That feeling of constructing your own answer is exactly the skill that carries over into real interviews, real conversations, real life. Let's add 3 more personality words: reserved, tenacious, and pragmatic. Being reserved means being quiet or private, especially with strangers or in new social situations, not sharing your thoughts or feelings openly right away. He seems reserved at first, but once you get to know him, he's actually really funny. Being tenacious means holding on firmly to a goal, refusing to give up even when things get difficult. She's incredibly tenacious. She rewrote that proposal 4 times until it was exactly right. Being pragmatic means dealing with things in a realistic, practical way rather than following theory or emotion. He's very pragmatic about decisions. He just asks, does this actually solve the problem? Shadow all 3 with me now. He seems reserved at first. She's incredibly tenacious. He's very pragmatic about decisions. These 3 words alone could describe almost anyone you know, and now you have the precision to actually say it in English. Let's do a short, calm moment here before we continue into travel and technology. Settle your shoulders. Let your breathing slow down for just a few seconds. You've now learned words across 3 full clusters: communication, work, emotions, and personality. And your brain has been actively building, not just receiving, this entire time. That's the exact opposite of the passive listening habit we exposed at the very beginning. And you should feel genuinely proud of that shift happening in real time. Let's move into a cluster that changes the scenery completely. Travel. Because English learners often discover just how much vocabulary they're missing the moment they land somewhere new. Tired, disoriented, trying to make sense of an unfamiliar place in a language that suddenly feels faster than they remember. Picture this. You've just landed after a long flight. Your body feels heavy. The airport signs are in a language you don't fully understand. And someone asks you a quick question at customs. This is exactly the moment where advanced vocabulary either helps you stay calm or leaves you fumbling for the simplest words. Here's your next word: disoriented. To feel disoriented means to feel confused about where you are or what's happening, often physically, sometimes mentally too. After the long flight, I felt completely disoriented. I couldn't even remember which exit led to the taxis. Shadow it with me right now. The instant you hear it, I felt completely disoriented. I couldn't even remember which exit led to the taxis. Next word: navigate. To navigate means to find your way through a place, a system, or even a difficult situation. It works for streets, for airports, and for conversations. It took me a few days to navigate the city on my own, but once I understood the metro, it became easy. Shadow it. It took me a few days to navigate the city on my own. And one more: acclimate. To acclimate means to gradually get used to a new environment, climate, or situation. It usually takes about a week to acclimate to the time difference, so don't panic if you feel exhausted at first. Shadow it. It usually takes about a week to acclimate to the time difference. Let's step into a full scene, because travel vocabulary always feels most alive inside an actual moment. Picture a small guest house, somewhere unfamiliar. Early morning, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen downstairs. Two travelers, Lucas and Mia, who just met the night before, are sitting at a shared breakfast table. Lucas says, "Honestly, I was so disoriented yesterday. I walked in the wrong direction for 20 minutes. Mia laughs and says, "Same here. It's hard to navigate a new city on the first day, especially with jet lag." Lucas says, "Exactly. How long have you been traveling?" Mia says, "About 2 weeks now. I think I finally acclimated to the time zone." Lucas says, "Any tips for someone who just arrived?" Mia says, "Just give yourself permission to get a little lost. That's honestly how you learn the streets fastest." Lucas says, "That's actually good advice." Now shadow this full exchange with me, one line right after another, letting your voice match the tired but curious energy of two travelers comparing notes. "I was so disoriented yesterday. It's hard to navigate a new city on the first day. I finally acclimated to the time zone." Give yourself permission to get a little lost. Let's add a phonetics moment here, because travel conversations happen fast, often in noisy places like airports and train stations, and understanding fast-connected speech becomes essential. Take the phrase, "give yourself," from Mia's line. In slow, careful speech, you'd hear "give yourself," two separate words. But in natural, fast speech, that V sound often blends directly into the Y, creating something closer to "give yourself," almost like one smooth unit. Listen slow, "give yourself." Now fast, "give yourself." Another common one in travel English, kind of, often becomes kinda in relaxed speech. Slow, kind of. Fast, kinda. So a sentence like, "I'm kind of lost," often sounds in real conversation closer to "I'm kinda lost," with the words flowing together as one breath. Two more travel words before we move on. Itinerary and hospitable. An itinerary is a detailed plan of a trip, listing the places you'll visit and when. Our itinerary was too packed, honestly. We should have left more free time to just wander. Being hospitable means being warm, welcoming, and generous toward guests or visitors. Everyone we met on that trip was so hospitable. They kept inviting us in for tea. Shadow both. Our itinerary was too packed. Everyone we met on that trip was so hospitable. Notice that phrase again, kept inviting us in. A very natural, very common structure in English storytelling that's worth absorbing alongside the vocabulary itself. Let's shift into our next cluster now. Technology, because whether you're at work, traveling, or simply living your daily life, technology vocabulary shows up constantly, and a surprising number of learners still describe every tech problem with the same tired phrase, It's not working. Let's fix that today. Picture this. You're on a call, sharing your screen, and suddenly something breaks unexpectedly in front of everyone. Here's your next word: glitch. A glitch is a small, usually temporary problem or malfunction in a system or piece of technology. Sorry, there's some kind of glitch. The screen keeps freezing every few seconds. Shadow it. There's some kind of glitch. The screen keeps freezing. Next, seamless. Something seamless. Works smoothly, without any noticeable problems or interruptions, moving from one part to the next, effortlessly. Once we fixed that bug, the whole process became completely seamless. Shadow it. The whole process became completely seamless. And one more, intuitive. Something intuitive is easy to understand or use naturally, without needing much explanation. The new app is really intuitive. I figured out how to use it within a minute. Shadow it. The new app is really intuitive. Let's build a workplace scene around technology, since this is exactly where these words matter most in real life. Picture an open office. Afternoon light through large windows. Two colleagues, Ben and Priya, troubleshooting a presentation just minutes before a client call. Priya says, "Wait, something's wrong. There's a glitch in the slides. The numbers aren't updating." Ben says, "Let me check the file. Maybe it's a syncing issue." Priya says, "We really need this to be seamless for the client. They're joining in 10 minutes. Ben says, "Okay, found it. Try refreshing now." Priya says, "Perfect. That worked." Honestly, this new dashboard is so intuitive once you know where to click. Ben says, "Yeah, once you know where to click." They both laugh. Now, let's try our second role play of this video. I'll play Priya, and I want you to respond as Ben, using your own words this time, right after each of my lines, in the pause I give you. Ready? Priya says, "Wait, something's wrong. There's a glitch in the slides." Now you respond as Ben, pause, and speak your response out loud. Good. However you responded, you just practiced reacting naturally under a little pressure, which is exactly the skill real workplace English demands. Let's add 3 more technology words: obsolete, cutting edge, and troubleshoot. Something obsolete is outdated, no longer useful, because something newer has replaced it. That software is basically obsolete now. Hardly anyone still uses it. Cutting edge describes something extremely modern at the very forefront of innovation. Their new product uses some genuinely cutting-edge technology, way ahead of the competition. To troubleshoot means to identify and solve a problem, especially in a technical system. It took us almost an hour to troubleshoot the issue, but we finally found the cause. Shadow all 3. That software is basically obsolete now. Their new product uses some genuinely cutting-edge technology. It took us almost an hour to troubleshoot the issue. Let's talk about stress patterns for a moment, because English sentence stress can completely change meaning, and this is something textbooks almost never explain in a practical way. Consider the sentence, I didn't say she broke it. Depending on which word you stress, the meaning shifts entirely. Stress on I. I didn't say she broke it, meaning someone else said it. Stress on say. I didn't say she broke it, meaning I only implied it. I didn't state it directly. Stress on she. I didn't say she broke it, meaning maybe someone else broke it. This same principle works with our technology sentence from earlier. We really need this to be seamless, with stress on need, emphasizes urgency, while stress on seamless emphasizes the specific quality required. Try saying it both ways with me. Stress on need. We really need this to be seamless. Now stress on seamless. We really need this to be seamless. Feel the difference in emphasis? That's real, native level control over meaning, and it's something very few learners ever practice deliberately. Let's take another short breathing pause here, because we've now covered 5 full clusters of vocabulary: listening and communication, work, emotions, personality, travel, and technology, and that's an enormous amount of real usable English. Let your shoulders drop for a second. Take one slow breath and just notice how much more of this feels familiar now compared to the very beginning of the video. That shift you're feeling, that's not imagination, that's your brain actively rewiring itself around these words in real time. Now let's move into our final vocabulary cluster: education and self-improvement, because this cluster is a little different. These are words you'll use to describe your own learning journey, which means you can apply every single one of them to exactly what you're doing right now in this very video. Here's your next word: retain. To retain information means to keep it in your memory over time instead of forgetting it quickly. I used to forget vocabulary within days, but shadowing has really helped me retain new words much longer. Shadow it. Shadowing has really helped me retain new words much longer. Next, grasp. To grasp a concept means to understand it clearly, often after some initial confusion. It took a few examples before I really grasped how connected speech works, but once I did, everything clicked. Shadow it. It took a few examples before I really grasped how connected speech works. And one more essential word: plateau. A plateau, when talking about learning, is a period where your progress seems to stop, even though you're still practicing regularly. Every learner hits a plateau eventually. The key is not stopping just because progress feels invisible. Shadow it. Every learner hits a plateau eventually. Let's build one final conversation around learning itself, because this scene mirrors exactly what's happening for you right now watching this video. Picture 2 language learners, Yuki and Tom, chatting after an online class, both a little tired but genuinely engaged. Yuki says, "Honestly, I feel like I've hit a plateau lately. I'm practicing every day, but I don't feel like I'm improving." Tom says, "I went through that too. What helped me was shadowing. actually saying the sentences out loud right after hearing them. Yuki says, "Does it actually help you retain more?" Tom says, "Definitely. I grasp grammar patterns so much faster now because I'm not just reading them, I'm feeling them in my mouth." Yuki says, "That makes sense. I think I've been too passive with my listening." Tom says, "Exactly. That was my exact problem too." Now, let's shadow this exchange together one final time with full energy. I feel like I've hit a plateau lately. What helped me was shadowing, saying the sentences out loud right after hearing them. I grasp grammar patterns so much faster now. I've been too passive with my listening. Two final vocabulary words to close this cluster: comprehension and breakthrough. Comprehension is your ability to understand something, especially spoken or written language. My comprehension has improved so much since I started shadowing daily. I catch things I used to miss completely. A breakthrough is a sudden, significant moment of progress or understanding after a period of struggle. I had a real breakthrough last month. Suddenly, conversations just felt easier, like something clicked into place. Shadow both. My comprehension has improved so much since I started shadowing daily. I had a real breakthrough last month. Suddenly, conversations just felt easier. Now, let's properly explain the technique we've been using this entire video, because understanding why it works will make you far more likely to actually keep doing it. After this video ends, shadowing means listening to a sentence and repeating it back immediately, almost simultaneously, like an echo that happens instantly rather than after a delay. It's completely different from simply repeating after someone once they've finished speaking. The immediacy is the entire point because it forces your brain and your mouth to process rhythm, stress, and pronunciation in real time, exactly the way your brain processes rhythm and pronunciation when you're actually speaking spontaneously in a real conversation. When you shadow correctly, you're not translating, you're not thinking about grammar rules. You're simply matching sound and rhythm, and that motor memory, the physical memory in your mouth and your breathing, transfers directly into real conversations far more effectively than silent reading ever could. Silent. Ubedi again. Let's also talk properly about listening for gist. Catching the overall meaning instead of every individual word, because this skill matters just as much as shadowing does, especially once you're in a real conversation with a native speaker talking at natural, sometimes rapid speed. Here's a simple way to train this. When you're listening to something in English, whether it's this video, a podcast, or a real conversation, resist the urge to pause and look up every single unfamiliar word. Instead, let yourself keep moving. And afterward, ask yourself just one question. What was this basically about? If you can answer that question reasonably well, your gist listening is working, even if you missed several individual words along the way. This is exactly what fluent bilingual speakers do constantly. They filter constantly, keeping the meaning and letting the unnecessary details go. Now, here's an exercise I want you to actually do. Not just listen to, because active production is what makes today's vocabulary permanently yours instead of temporarily familiar. Look around wherever you are right now and out loud, in English, describe your environment using your senses and at least 2 or 3 words from today's lesson. I'll give you an example first. The room feels a little overwhelming right now. There's a lot of noise outside, but I'm trying to stay focused and grasp everything I'm learning. Now it's your turn. Pause the video for 30 seconds if you need to, and describe your own surroundings out loud, using words like discern, adaptable, seamless, retain, disoriented, or hospitable, whatever fits what you see and feel around you right now. Go ahead, try it. This single habit, narrating your environment out loud in English using real vocabulary, is one of the fastest ways to turn passive knowledge into active. Not automatic fluency, because you're not waiting for a classroom or a video to practice. You're creating practice out of ordinary life. You have done something genuinely remarkable in this video, and I want you to actually recognize it before we close, because recognizing progress is part of what makes progress stick. Let's do our fluency round now, moving quickly, no long pauses, just letting all of today's vocabulary flow together the way it would in real, fast, natural conversation. Ready? Let's go. You discerned the meaning even when it wasn't obvious. You gleaned useful details from a confusing situation. You internalized new patterns instead of just memorizing them. You assimilated new language the way you assimilate a new culture. You stayed proactive instead of waiting for problems to appear. You streamlined a process that used to be clunky. You learned when to delegate instead of carrying everything alone. You leveraged what you already had. You found a way to mitigate risk instead of panicking about it. You negotiated for something better. You kept your message concise. You admitted when you felt overwhelmed. You named that quiet feeling of being apprehensive before something uncertain. You remembered what it felt like to be elated. You called yourself resilient because you are. You recognized when you felt completely drained, and you rested anyway. You described someone meticulous, someone adaptable, someone assertive, someone reserved, someone tenacious, someone pragmatic, all in one afternoon. You felt disoriented in a new place and kept walking anyway. You learned to navigate the unfamiliar. You gave yourself time to acclimate. You planned an itinerary and met people who were hospitable. You spotted a glitch and fixed it. You built something seamless. You designed something intuitive. You let go of what was obsolete. You reached for what was cutting edge. You learned to troubleshoot instead of panicking. instead of panicking. You worked to retain what you learn. You finally grasped something that used to confuse you. You hit a plateau and kept going anyway. Your comprehension grew. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, you had a real breakthrough. Say that last sentence with me one more time, slowly, and really mean it. I had a real breakthrough today. Good. That's not just a vocabulary sentence anymore. That's true, right now, because of what you just did. So here is your specific task before you close this video, and I want it to be exact, not vague. In the comments, write one full sentence using any word from today's lesson, describing something real from your own life, your own day, your own week. Not a random example, your actual life. If you're feeling brave, write 2 sentences using 2 different words and connect them the way we practiced connecting ideas throughout this lesson. I read these comments, and nothing tells me a lesson actually worked better than seeing these words show up in your own real sentences, written by you, about you. And remember the habit we exposed right at the beginning. Passive listening, the quiet trap that keeps learners stuck for years without them even realizing it. You already broke that pattern today. Every single time you shadowed a sentence instead of just letting it pass by. Every time you paused to answer a question out loud instead of just nodding along in your head. Keep choosing active listening over passive listening. This week, this month, every time you put on English content, whether it's this channel or anywhere else. Small, consistent, active moments like this are exactly what quietly, steadily, build real fluency, the kind that doesn't disappear the moment you close the video. If today's lesson helped you, subscribe to Natural Word English so you don't miss the next one. And I'll see you very soon in the next video with more real vocabulary tied to more real moments from more real life.